Well, folks, thanks again for tuning in at the start of another weekend. And we've got a ton of stuff to look at here. This is the news that matters, and we're giving you the insights behind those headlines. Of course, Super Bowl being a huge topic today, as we've already seen. You know, one of the things about all the controversy around Bad Bunny is the imagery that was used in his presentation, and some of it very beautiful. Let's face it, it was homey style. You had a wedding, you had a lot of things, but also Bad Bunny's political message is significantly to the left. One of the issues, of course, in the U.S., for those of you who might not be focused on that, the whole issue of Puerto Rico becoming eventually gaining statehood, which is something that many of them have wanted for decades. And the reality of that would be, and this is a concern that's expressed by some on the other side, is that if they had statehood, then of course the voting bloc that would go to them, the number of seats in the Senate, the number of seats in in Congress overall, would be significantly left-leaning or Democrat, and that some of the feeling is if they were ever to become a state, that would mean a constant tilt towards a Democratic president and election in the U.S. Who knows if that'll work out that way, but that's been a concern, and that's continuing to be looked at. So you could see the promotion of that with Bad Bunny promoting a very warm kind of backdrop in terms of Puerto Rico itself. The other thing that was interesting is being pointed out is that with all of the flags in some of the background scenery there, promoting sort of a message of unity, but the U.S. flag, and this is a concern to many in the U.S. who are commenting on that, the U.S. flag just being one of many and kind of almost like a backdrop showing a fading, at least in the view of left-leaning people, of wanting to see the U.S. fade somewhat in terms of on the international scene. And I guess one of the things in terms of the music itself being mainly in Spanish, of course, that was interesting. It's been pointed out that in previous performances and previous shows that Bad Bunny has done, he wears a dress or a skirt. And one comment was that at least if he had been wearing a puffy skirt, he wouldn't have been grabbing his crotch as much as he did during the Super Bowl show. And that's in front of millions of kids. So you have to kind of wonder what kind of thinking is going behind that. But let's see how things continue to evolve in the whole discussion relative to Puerto Rico and other situations like that. Very interesting items arising from the most recent last week drop of, they say, another 3 million pages of the Epstein files. And people are wondering, you know, how can there be so many pages on this guy and so much? Well, what's coming out right now, and this is just today, page after page, thousands of pages of correspondence of Jeffrey Epstein with the key leaders in the world regarding the World Economic Forum, regarding restructuring global currency, regarding using the I guess some would call it the myth of imminent global emergency to promote what they call sustainable goals and sustainable digital currencies, looking at how to develop a one world currency, getting it down to about 6 or 7 right now. Very extensive involvement and this is after, of course, Epstein's conviction on sex-related charges for which he actually spent time in jail. So the number of people, whether we're talking about Bill Gates, whether we're talking about world leaders and former head of Harvard and just on, top business leaders, there's Jeffrey Epstein right in the midst of it. And so I have to kind of apologize a bit here to viewers and listeners, my regular listeners. I always kind of downplayed that when we were hearing about Epstein and how much he was involved in these, the so-called global currency discussions. Very, very involved, as these emails are clearly showing. Let's see where all of that is going to go. It's sort of raised another thing that some people are finding very interesting, and that is that your emails, my emails, really never are safe, and they are never going to be safe. They can be revealed if the right circumstances are requiring it. And that's certainly what we've seen. People are around the world, some of the top best known people around the world, most heavily influenced people in heavily influenced places and positions now seeing their emails out there for everybody to see. Somebody just pointed out that going way back a couple thousand years, one of the writers in the New Testament, Luke, writes something in the his 12th chapter there. He says, all things will be revealed. Everything that was said in darkness is going to come to light, and those things that were whispered on the whispered in dark places and in secret places are going to be broadcast aloud from the rooftop. So people have always wondered, how could that be? Folks, I'm telling you, every email you send, every guarantee you get from whichever provider you use that it will never be revealed, and after 30 days it's going to be eliminated and it will evaporate, we're finding not true. So keep that in mind. Everything you send has the ability to one day be revealed. Keep it in mind, folks. Whatever networks you're on, whatever videos you're generating, whatever it might be, it's all there ready to be published. Well, the Dow Jones, which is a measure in the United States of the health of the economy, has broken through a historic, it's called the 50,000 limit, or the 50,000 level. Never before in history has the Dow Jones been this strong and been this healthy. Now, people might wonder, the Dow Jones think of it as a basket of 30 of the largest companies, and they keep getting measured over time. What is the value of the top 30 companies? And this is the first time in history that value has hit something called the 50,000 mark. It's not $50,000, that's just the valuation there. And it was predicted a year ago when Trump got elected that if his economic policies were successful, that you might see the Dow Jones within 4 years hitting the 50,000 mark. It has hit the 50,000 mark in 1 year. That's completely astounding. It doesn't mean everything is perfect. It doesn't mean there still aren't difficulties in the market. Some people say, well, it's entirely driven by the big tech companies. That's not quite accurate. About a quarter of the Dow Jones is made up of tech companies. So some pretty astounding stuff, and mainstream media, of course, hating to report that because it would almost give the sign and give a look that something is working in the economy, and most media don't want that happening because it would reflect positively on Trump. In Cuba, which is, they say, nearing really economic collapse, and honestly, it's been on the verge of economic collapse for decades. I took a trip to Cuba with a group of farmers who were doing work helping Cubans in the rural areas, helping them to establish small poultry farms and small hog operations and things like that. I'd always heard how poverty-stricken Cuba was, especially once you get outside of Havana, but absolutely was just blown away by the level of poverty, by no food on the shelves, by the fact that doctors have to be paid secretly by anybody who wants to get medical treatment. None of that ever broadcast in mainstream media because, of course, this is a communist dictatorship, and everything in the world of communism, according to most mainstream media, is beautiful and lovely. And so really this is a shocking revelation, shocking to some, the numbers just out last week, that the main supporters of Cuba, the main reason Cuba has not collapsed to date is the support it gets from Canada, yes, from Canadians. Largely that would be in the tourism-related markets, but there's also Canadian investment that has gone in there over the years, and help from the Canadian government. So kind of an irony there that a decrepit communist regime that is horrific in terms of their human rights record, and they are mainly being supported by gullible Canadians. Kind of a sad comment. You know, I've mentioned before, if you want to see a movie, a historical movie, it's been out for a few years now. It's called Mr. Jones, the movie Mr. Jones. You want to check that out because it gives the history of why mainstream media way back in the 20s and in the 30s were not reporting what a disaster Soviet communism was. The thousands and thousands of people being killed and being put in prisons, and the starvation that hit Ukraine in the millions, not really that significantly reported by the so-called intellectuals, certainly not by media such as the New York Times. So it's a fascinating, it's historical, it's accurate, and you get to see the depths of depravity of mainstream media and why they weren't reporting on the devastation that was communism. You want to check that out? Well, Costa Rica just had an election about a week ago, and they elected a woman for the second time in their history, Laura Fernandez Delgado. I think you'll be hearing her name probably under Laura Fernandez. I just checked, and after 1 week, after it was a historic election, not one media report from Canada's national and taxpayer-subsidized broadcaster, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, not one word about a woman being elected as head of a major country. And CBC, which usually would be, you would think would be excited about this, not one word. Why is that? Well, as I've said before, any woman who is identified as a small c conservative woman with small c conservative values is going to be despised by mainstream media, is going to be underreported, and will only be overreported if it's perceived that she's making mistakes. So, send a note to fire off an email to the CBC and ask why. I think it's veiled, not even veiled, it's hatred. It really is hatred. They can't stand the fact, they can't even imagine the fact that a woman could have small c conservative values and win and be elected. It's one of the most terrifying things the CBC and other mainstream media could possibly face. Well, talking about a woman who's in serious trouble, and I say this with full sympathy and empathy, you've been following whatever country you're in, the kidnapping of Nancy Guthrie, who is the mother of Savannah Guthrie, a very well-known news commentator, news anchor in the United States, and everybody is following with bated breath and hoping and praying for the safety for Nancy Guthrie. It's just a horrific and tragic situation. I'm going to make a prediction here. I don't know how this case is going to roll out, but because of, and understandably so, because of the worldwide media attention to it, I will guarantee you, sadly and unfortunately, there will be copycats. There will be more of these, because the warped, demented people who are out there who want to get some kind of worldwide recognition for their egotistical fantasies, you're going to see more of this. So it's unavoidable. I think it's unavoidable. I totally understand and agree with the Guthrie family using the public means of communication to try and get their mother back. I have no issue with that. I'm just being predictive here. You're going to see more of these, unfortunately. Another thing following the Super Bowl is a revelation, especially in places like California. California, which being left-leaning, of course, and Democratic, will tax anything that moves. And as they say, and if it doesn't move, they'll subsidize it. Last year was the first year in California's history where there was a net migration out of California, people leaving in bigger numbers than they're coming in, because the taxes increasing on people who are successful, on people who create jobs, on people who are entrepreneurs and innovative, on people who create successful companies. They're being pushed out by the insane but leftist the socialistic leanings of the California government. Socialism, which is always built, its only success is that it preys upon and it counts on envy and resentment from people who aren't as wealthy as somebody else. All of that to say there's a tax called, this came to light in the Super Bowl, it's been known, but there's the jock tax. So athletes, especially because of the fact that athletes in the Super Bowl, and it was being played in California, get extra pay. They get about $180,000 for years of training and deprivation that athletes go through to maintain top physical form, and then the very tough business of professional football. And so they get the winning team get about $175,000 each just for being in that one game. The losing team gets about $105,000. And that is being taxed also, but at a higher rate. So everything, keep this in mind, whether it's the Democrat government or parties in the US or the socialist parties in Canada, the New Democrat and others, they will always operate from the point of view of envy. They will always operate from the point of view of punishing you harder. If you're successful, it doesn't matter how many thousands of jobs you create for others, you will be punished. And so the result of that is people leave your jurisdiction. And we're certainly seeing the move from, for instance, California to Florida and to other states. And that's also had the effect in Florida. They've revamped their laws regarding condominiums and making sure that every condominium owner has full access to all of the finances of their condominiums and their condominium buildings. There's new laws in place there to grant long-term security to make sure that things that need to be fixed in condos continue to get fixed. So it's really resulting in ongoing interest in condos and in homes in Florida, and people are running, people are fleeing from states like California who want to take all your gold or even a little bit of silver and bronze. Talking about gold, silver, and bronze, one of the stories coming out of the Olympics, which is always exciting to watch, is the medals. The medals are breaking. When the athletes, there's been a number of cases where the athletes hold up the medals, to do that pretend bite of the medal, and then the athlete, it breaks. The clasp holding the ribbon to the medal, unfortunately, is breaking, and the beautiful Olympic medals crashing to the ground. And we've got assurance from the Olympic Committee that they are investigating right away to see what happened there. Well, we'll need a miracle for them to get to the bottom of that. But talking about miracles, the Miracle Channel, which is a Christian-based, faith-based channel and TV and radio outlet in the U.S., celebrating its 30th year. That's a kind of a landmark. And it's also the sad part of that related to Canada is becoming much more difficult in Canada because of laws that are being passed by the federal Liberal government and Prime Minister Mark Carney, laws that are coming into place to make it more difficult not just to have, for instance, Christian broadcasting, but to even have open expressions of faith. The hate laws are being looked at. They're looking at taking verses from the Bible that they're going to deem as hate. I think you're going to see this on the increase unless people wake up and realize that once you lose religious freedom, you continue to lose every other freedom. So hoping that there will be some kind of a change there in Canada. And thumbs up to the Miracle Network, 30 years of successful programming. Well, in terms of wanting to have Goodwill stores, as you know, that Goodwill organization in Canada and in the United States, principally in the U.S., announcing another record year. And they're looking at states like New York, where, say, New York City, where, lots of celebrities, lots of wealthy people, and they give their clothes or they sell their clothes in vintage stores. But real increase in interest, and it sort of reflects, I'll have to say that my wife for years has worked with, encouraged her granddaughters especially, and grandsons, to come with her to Goodwill stores long before that was a fashionable thing to do. And they love it, and it shows Gen Z itself is really loving getting, for sustainable reasons and reasons of the environment, but also to save money, going to these Goodwill stores. And you got to love the term that they use for their clothes. And not used clothes, don't say that. These are pre-loved clothes. Pre-loved clothes. Folks, a lot of us have been pre-loved, and it's good to think about your friends and your neighbors as people who need love, care, and attention. Keep that in mind as we go into the day, and we'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Thanks so much for tuning in.